This is TWiT.
Let's talk, believe it or not, Paul is if you follow Paul on Instagram, you notice he has music night every week. He and his wife will sit down, they'll listen to an album.
Yeah.
Wow. You're a music fan.
Yeah. I grew up loving music. I don't know this for a fact, but I feel like one of the big differences between my generation and maybe younger generations is that we listened to music, that was current, obviously, but we also listened to music from, the 70s, the 60s, the 50s. And I feel like that's kind of been lost a little bit. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But we love music from almost all eras, I would say, or all eras, I guess. As our kids have gotten older, we've found music through them, which is very interesting. My daughter, before she went to college, would be downstairs taking a shower, cranking this music through her Sonos speaker down there. And there was one song I would hear, and I finally went down there and I said, what is that song? And it was like a song by Zayn, who used to be in One Direction.
Oh boy. Who
I used to make fun of because that was my daughter's favorite band at the time. And I called them One Dimension. So I'm not close to new music, or whatever. But anyway, I was fascinated, like a lot of people, when Peter Jackson did the Get Back documentary last year.
Oh yeah.
Wow. This year, Giles Martin, the son of George Martin, remixed yet again. They've been various remixes of the Beatles album, but he remixed Revolver using the technology that Peter Jackson's company created for Get Back, which separates discrete parts of audio into their own tracks, right? So 4-track recording was the norm back at that time. That's what they had. And if you needed more than 4 things going on at once, those things all had to be on one track. And then you could kind of fake multi-track recording by putting 4 tracks together, adding it as one track to another 4-track recording, and the sound quality goes down, et cetera, et cetera. And they've actually figured out a way to pull out all the discrete voices and instruments, which is astonishing. And in fact, it's actually better than that, because there's one description I heard was that every part of Ringo Starr's drum is its own track now. So every time you hit a different drum head or whatever, or cymbal or whatever, those are all been pulled out, and they're all discrete, and they're perfect. Like, they sound perfect. It was just one of the best descriptions I've ever heard. I don't know who said this. Said it would be like handing someone a cake, and then an hour later they come back with 3 eggs, a cup of sugar, a cup of flour, and whatever other ingredients. And they're like, here you go. Here. And it's like, that's impossible.
You can remake it.
But they've done it, right?
It is amazing, isn't it? And I didn't, by the way, I listened to Revolver before I knew that. And I was just baffled. I thought, wow, this is great.
This sounds so good. Yeah.
Because the way the Beatles worked, they only had a 4-track, I think. It might have had an 8-track, but I think they only had 4 tracks.
It was 4.
So if they wanted to do more than 4 tracks, they had to do something called bounce them. So you would record an organ and record, you'd fill 3 of the 4 tracks with organ, guitar, and drum. And then you'd bounce it all down to the 4th track. And then that 4th track has the 3, but they're all mixed together, and now you have 3.
But every time you do that, you lose quality, and you also echo and bleed through.
Yeah, but on these machines, these are very high. They're running them at high speed. They're good quality. So yes, you always lose a generation,
but the problem is to remix that is impossible.
You can't unmix
now you have
it.
Multiple.
Yes,
right.
The cake is baked.
That's exactly right.
So because everything is bounced, they only have access to the last 4 tracks.
And if they made bad decisions, which they often did with the Beatles, you would have everything kind of tilted to one side, and one thing would be over on the right or whatever.
Right.
The best example, I wrote this in the article I wrote about this, but as a big fan of Van Halen, if you go back and listen to their first 2 albums, Eddie Van Halen is on one side and the rest of the band is on the other side. And it is awful. It's like the most awful mix. And I learned, this is probably obvious if you're into music. I just learned this literally this past month. When you go see a band live, it's mono. And the reason it's mono is it has to sound the same no matter where you're sitting. You can't have Eddie Van Halen only over there at a concert. You have to hear him everywhere, right? I never knew that, but a lot of the Beatles albums suffered from this kind of a problem. So there have been remixed versions of these albums that George Martin and then Giles Martin and now just Giles Martin have worked on. I think they're going to do the whole catalog over this way.
I think they are. It started with the Vegas Cirque du Soleil show,
that's
Love.
Right, Love. That's right.
Which is the most amazing thing. If you've never seen it,
it's great.
The sound is perfect. Of course, it's a wonderful show, but it's all remixed. And you hear the songs as if you've never heard them before, and they're beautiful.
What this is to me is the promise of spatial audio, but realized. Like spatial audio is kind of hit or miss, and sometimes you need a special setup or headphones or whatever. But just with like a Sonos system like we have, there's these songs. Even in the car, they sound great. But I mean, with like Eleanor Rigby, which is a full orchestra,
incredible.
You get individual violins going at different. Vum, 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 and it's like, oh my God, it's in space. You can
in that theater, which was purpose built for Love. There's speakers all around you, including behind in your seat, and so they're able to completely spatialize it, and it's in the round, so everybody gets an. It's an amazing.
It's totally worth seeing.
Oh, we've gone back twice now. We loved it. Yeah.
This album, I've listened to this album like repeatedly, and there's all these like not really outtakes, but like different versions of songs. One of the most like the silliest Beatles songs of all time, like Yellow Submarine, began as a sad kind of a dirge song, which John Lennon's singing it, by the way, and it's like in the town where I was born.
It was so weird hearing that,
and it's like,
oh my God,
no,
this takes.
It wasn't even rumored that this had ever happened.
Yeah.
Like no one even talked about this.
Yeah.
And this is, I go back and forth with Revolver Soul, but this is possibly their best album.
Revolver's when they became the Beatles. They stopped being the four mop tops from Liverpool.
Yeah.
They went from being One Dimension to Zayn.
This was the point where they knew they weren't going to be touring anymore, right? So they were like, we're going to make the music we want to. First of all, we hate touring, but the music we're making is the music we want to make is too complicated.
We'll never have to make this live
for four people to stand on a stage and make it, right? So it's an interesting kind of synthesis of technology, right? Which is what we really talk about most of the time here, and music, which I also love, and not just like doing it because we can, but doing it because we want it to be as good as it can be. And this is, this is astonishing. Like it's astonishing.
Yeah.
It's just awesome. It's awesome. And if you've never listened to this kind of thing, or you don't really know that much about the Beatles, maybe, which, you're human, that's impossible. But do check this thing out. It's just so good.
It's also mind-boggling. The ability that Apple Records has had to force me to buy new copies of those songs multiple times.
The only thing I bought more often than different versions of Beatle music is different versions of Star Wars movies. Yes, I absolutely.
It's unbelievable. 100%. I mean, I bought them when they came out. I bought them.
We literally, in the past year, bought the remixed version of Let It Be.
Oh yeah,
the new out.
That's because I think we're hitting the 50th anniversary type of things, and we're getting. I have all of them. Everyone
they're going to do that again now too.
I love them, and it's always wonderful because, I thought after 1970 we were never going to hear new Beatles music, but when you're getting these outtakes, you're hearing it with a fresh ear. You're really hearing something different. You're hearing that's why Get Back is so incredible to watch them. It's amazing.
Get Back, it's funny. I feel like there are two responses to Get Back. There's the people who are sitting there like, man, this is really long. And there are people like me who are like, I could watch this for the rest of my life.
I've rewatched it.
Yeah, I have too. And there's more of it, right? Eventually there's going to be a longer, there's more of it.
The technology Peter Jackson came up with, because the film wasn't shot for their dialogue, it was shot for the music. So they never recorded the dialogue. So the technology he used is mind-blowing.
Yeah, they pulled it out. Yeah. Well, it's like that scene where John and
in the teapot,
Paul are right, and they have a microphone, and like they're purposely hiding their voices, and they can, because I think George had left temporarily, and they're like, what are we going to do? And it's just private conversation, which both camps Paul's still alive, obviously, and it's this. What it reveals is that these guys loved each other and still cared. And the original Let It Be documentary, or whatever it was called, I think it was Let It Be, made it look like this was why the band broke up. Yep. And what you find out is like, no, these guys were totally cohesive, collaborating. Like he invents Let It Be on the spot. Like you see it. What the? Like it's
amazing.
Incredible.
He's just
and then he nails
doodling around on the piano.
He sings it. He just sings it like it's like that song and Eleanor Rigby are basically just Paul McCartney. Like it's let's just be honest. And dear God, is there a more talented person on earth?
It's really amazing
than this guy. I mean, it's
all
incredible.
of them, and even John at the time was deeply into his heroin addiction. But even you also see that Yoko wasn't the evil witch who split the group up.
In fact, they made a joke about it. Like he's like, "Oh yeah, people are going to say years from now that we broke up because Yoko said on an amp."
No,
and it's like, and then they all laughed. Like to them, this was nothing.
No, they loved each other.
That's the narrative.
It was just it's an amazing story, and I'm just really gratified that we get more of it because it was amazing then, and there's more.
It's a gift.
It's a gift.
All it is a gift.
Yeah. And you thought you were listening to a Windows podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm just listen. This is like I said, vaguely technology based. Go listen to this.
No, I'm with you.
Unbelievable.
I'm actually thrilled that you brought it up. I mentioned it a few times on other shows, but I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
it is an example of technology and somebody like Peter Jackson who had the money, the will, the power to bring this all together and make it happen.
So I mean, this will probably change eventually, and I'm sure there'll be other things like this, but he's not giving this to anyone. He's like, you can use it at Apple Studio for the Beatles. Like before that goes anywhere else, he's like, finish that first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do them all.
Finish.
And
but you think about their artists like Prince, the Grateful Dead, who have many more hours of recorded music than we will ever hear, you know?
Sure.
You know, Prince would sit in his studio and record all night, all the time, and it's all there.
So if you have a good stereo system, there's something interesting about a lot of modern music where it's clearly made for this kind of a system. It just like pumps out of the Sonos, like it's amazing. And then you listen to music that you love from the past, and it just feels kind of thin or hollow or, you know, kind of bland.
Yeah.
And you see what they did here, and you're like, oh my God,
we could bring it back.
We can fix this.
We could fix it.
You know, and not change it. I don't mean change it. I don't mean modernize the guitar sound or anything like that.
No, I think that's why it's good Giles Martin is doing it. I think he has a reverence.
He's doing it right.
He has a reverence for the original.
He's like the Christopher Tolkien, right, of this world, where, right? He's like the child of the guy and carrying forth the tradition and doing the right thing with it. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's a lot of, it's what the real dirt that was done to the Beatles isn't this generation. It was Phil Spector and generations contemporaneous with the Beatles. The Beatles would be done with an album, say, we're done with it, we can't do any more. And then these producers would take it and do extreme stereo for the US.
God,
they'd ruin it.
Or what's his face?
Phil Spector ruined Let It Be.
Phil Spector ruined Let It Be. Oh my God. So yeah, like they did the trimmed down version of that, like Let It Be.
Yeah, the Wall of Sound version that Phil Spector did was not
Get rid
anything
of
the Beatles wanted or authorized. And I think, as I remember, they were horrified when they heard it. But
I think it's called, what's it called? Let It Be Stripped or Let It Be something. There's a version of it that's just the band.
I think that's probably the next album, right? Or maybe not. Are they doing it chronologically? So if they've done Revolver, they've got to.
Well, they started right in the middle, so I don't know what they're going to do. But exactly. I don't know. I mean,
it's really great. Yeah, really great.
I think he was like, I want to do that. I think he's like, this is my favorite. I'm doing this one first.
It's important historically for the Beatles because it really was the beginning of a new era of their music. Yeah. They really became the artists that they were. And so it's important for that reason. Hey, let's just take a quick
Tomorrow Never Knows.
Tomorrow Never Knows. What an amazing song.
Well, because, you know, they did some sitar stuff on Rubber Soul, and then this is where it became fully.
And they used the recording technology and those, but the birds and, oh my God, just amazing.
Awesome. Anyway, I'm sorry, I could go on.
I didn't know you were such a Beatles fan. I love it.
Yeah.
Happy to hear it.
If you are looking for a midweek update on the week's tech news, I got to tell you, you got to check out Tech News Weekly. See, it's all kind of built in there with the title. You get to learn about the news in tech that matters. Every Thursday, Jason Howell and I talk to the people making and breaking the tech news, get their insights and their interesting stories. It's a great show to check out. twit.tv/TNW.